Hi guys, it's Kian. Today I wanted to talk about BJD hybrids, how to make BJD hybrids, mostly head and body hybrids, and how to plan and research for it. So this is mostly my own takeaways over the years as I've made a lot of hybrid dolls. So I'm just going to show you all the dolls that I have which were hybrids. And today we're here with Salt, my Switch Sohua, who has been modified to fit on this Hyperhouse SID body, and you can check out the process in this video. So he is kind of like my most, the only hybrid that I have that really required modification work. Most of my other hybrids are relatively simple. I just find a head and a body that fits together and I plonk the head on the body. That's it. That's kind of like the main type of hybrid I'm going to be referring to in this guide, I guess. And yeah, so the first thing would be generally what is a BJD hybrid. So hybrids are dolls that use different parts from different companies and or different editions. So just to give a few examples, I think the common ones are like the head and bodies are from different companies. Of course, you can also have dolls where the head and body are from the same company, but they are actually obviously not supposed to match together. So my example here is Pebbles. Pebbles is a Unoa lead-in head on a Unoa 1.5 body. So the reason why she's a hybrid, even though they're both from the same company, is because without the buff head bag that she has, this faceplate actually cannot fit on this body because the faceplates don't match up. So that's why she's a hybrid. And there's also plenty of hybrids that I have which did not require modification work like Salt here. So Salt is kind of an exception. Okay, so reasons why people have hybrids. So like me, you could be wanting like a head on a very specific kind of body. In the case of Salt, I wanted him to be a lot buffer than his original body, which is the Switch Attractive 65 body. In other cases, like with my Megiddo Miho Sion, when I bought him, he was only available as a head and the company had no bodies. So I had to basically find another body for him. There's also certain cases where I wanted specific heads to be on certain bodies that are taller so that they will be taller than my other dolls. So things like that could affect why I and other owners want dolls to be hybrids. So the way I think about it is that there's generally two things to look out for. The first is the overall size. So by size, I mean things like, the size of the head and the body, and any kind of proportion like the head ratio to the shoulder ratio, or the size of the head to the neck, whether the neck hole and the neck fits. So all of this I kind of just clump together under size, because I think what you look out for in particular depends on what kind of hybrid you're making and what kind of purpose you have. So if you kind of just are forced to make a hybrid because you have no choice, like you bought a head that doesn't have a body, then probably the thing that you'll most commonly look out for is the neck size, or a neck size that will fit the original neck hole, as well as shoulders that are, big enough for the general doll. And height-wise, I think there's a lot more leeway. A lot of companies have similar size shoulders with different heights. So the height could really just be your own preference. So all these things I feel just go into size. Of course, you can also do things like neck fit, like, whether the neck really sits into the socket properly. And in this case, this boy's one only works because I've modified it. Originally, the neck is like here. You can see some old pictures. But, yeah, it depends also on how much modification work you're willing to do. So, if you're willing to mod, like I did for Salt, then you can, of course, go with a body for head that is, not really matching in size. There's also the possibility that the neck is much thinner than the head, which I personally find to be more of a problem than if the neck is too thick. I'd rather sand down the neck than figure out how to add stuff for it. But again, that is influenced by your preference and how fussy, I guess, you are about the size between the neck and the face and the shoulders and things like that. So the second thing that you will probably have to look out for is resin match. This one again is down to your preference. So some owners would want an almost perfect match. Some are okay with like maybe a 70% match, like there is a bit of a color difference between the head and the neck, but then you're like, real people are not perfectly even color throughout, and you think that that's fine. Or alternatively, if you're willing to do some sort of like dyeing or airbrushing to make the different parts work better in terms of color, then that will also increase the options that you have to look out for the hybrid. So that's kind of like the general considerations that I have going into making a BJD hybrid. And now on to how I do research when trying to figure out what I have in mind and whether it will work. So oftentimes I would start off with either the head or the body. Often it's really just the head. So you'll start with the information that is available about the head, things like head circumference, neck hole size, right? Those are more important. And in cases where the head maker actually only sells heads, often they will provide comparison pictures on certain common bodies. So from there, you can look at those common bodies, and if you like them, then great, you have your hybrid. And if you don't like them, you can use those as kind of like a start. So like, let's say the company shows this head on a Lutz 65cm body, then you can find out what size neck does the Lutz 65cm body have, what size shoulders does the Lutz 65cm body have, and so on. And depending on what you like or don't like about the hybrid that is already shown, you can figure out, okay, I actually want a bigger neck, like a thicker neck, or I actually want a slimmer pair of shoulders and things like that. So from there, you can kind of use that to search for other doll bodies that fit your criteria. Another way is, of course, let's say if you have a head that you have in mind and you know that other people also have hybrids, you can just search up like hybrids of this head. So for example, let's say it's a company that only produces heads, you can just search for that particular head sculpt on, let's say, Instagram or Google, and see what kind of bodies the owners have put them on, right? And another way, of course, is if you really don't know and you've tried doing this and you can't find any other hybrids or other owner pictures, you can try asking for comparison on DOA or any other BJD community groups that you have, because sometimes there are owners who have the parts that you are looking for to put together, but this one kind of has a bit of like a slim chance if, let's say, your doll is really new or it's kind of a rare doll, so not that many people have it. So after doing all of this, most of the time you should have a pretty good idea of whether the hybrid you want will work out, like whether the head and the body will roughly fit together size-wise. And the next part of what I'm going to describe, I guess, will only apply if you're very fussy or if you want to make sure that the hybrid that you're creating will fit what you have in mind for, let's say, height differences to another doll that you already have. So a lot of times, especially in the past, I really wanted certain dolls to be a lot taller, or well, not a lot, slightly taller than other dolls that I already have, or slightly shorter, or slightly slimmer, or slightly more buff. So for things like that, you would need to search for comparison pictures of like the bodies, at least. There used to be this BJD Comparison Heaven website that was super useful for that. The last few times I tried finding it, it wasn't available, so I'm not really sure whether it's still available anymore, but sometimes when you search, their old pictures still come up, I guess. So, yeah, so anyway, the short of it is you will search, let's say, in my case, I wanted an Iper House SID body, and I wanted to sort of guess whether he would match the Switch Sohua head, right? So I know the Sohua head fits on the Attractive 65 body, and I also have a Vox SD17 body at home that I can use for comparison if needed. So what I did was I searched for Iper House SID body next to either a Switch 65 body or a Vox SD17 body. with or without the head doesn't matter. I just wanted to see the size comparison. And then I would just, plonk the desired head on any other comparison bodies, and from there try to make a guesstimation. If you don't want to make a guesstimation and you have some Photoshop skills, that is also, of course, that's also something that I've done before. I've tried Photoshopping. I've tried taking some sort of comparison photos myself and trying to mesh them up with other people's comparison photos to get a gauge of whether the hybrid will work. That is, of course, on a bit of like a fussy level, so I don't know how many people really do that, but yeah. So that is if you really want to be sure. So I have done things like, let's say, put salt on a Volks ST17 body, try to find a picture of Hyperhouse SID next to Volks ST17, resize that picture so that the Volks ST17 body and my ST17 body picture matches, and then I shifted Salt's head from one picture over to the other and be like, I guess it could work. But in the case of dolls where you don't really know the neck size and things like that, you basically have to take a bit of a chance and be like, okay, if it really doesn't work out and it comes home and it's like, oh, the neck's too big, or oh, the neck's too small, you can try to modify it somehow. Or if I guess it doesn't really work and you're not that happy with it, you can always try to sell it away. So those are all options. So moving back to the second thing to look out for, which is resin match. Similar to like the overall size and proportion of the dolls, resin match for hybrids is really down to what you're comfortable with. Some people like me prefer a resin match that is quite close, even without any face-up work or modification or dyeing or anything like that. So this resin match is pretty close. I mean, he does have a face-up, but it is pretty close in person, so that was a bit of a luck out, I guess. In general, I prefer to have dolls where the resin match works better, so I don't have to do too much work on the face-up. But of course, if you're willing to airbrush the face to match the body, or in certain people's cases, they're willing to dye, let's say, the body a darker color to match the head, I think those are usually the typical ones, then you have a bigger range to work with. In the past, people may say like white skin is easier to hybridize, but nowadays I find that to not be really true, because over the years, I think there has been a bit of a split between like yellow tone, let's say white, and pink tone white. And then even for normal skin, which used to be mainly like yellow base, has now also have a lot of options that are pink tone. So just because resin color is like NS or white skin, it's not necessarily that easy to match, because even just getting it down to, is this a pink base resin or is it a yellow base resin, is already a big question. But yeah, I do find resin matching to be a bit more difficult nowadays because of the wide variety of resin colors available. But the general principle is the same. You just, search different parts. So let's say I've already figured out what kind of body I want and what kind of, to fit the kind of head I have. So I just search the company and the resin color that I want. Let's say Switch and Hyper normal skin. Right, you type that into Google, see what pops up. So oftentimes you would see like comparison pictures if you're lucky, and then of course like terrible results if you're not. And then you kind of just dig around. So a lot of times I've also resorted to just, searching for the company and seeing whether any particular owners own the dolls that are in the two companies I'm looking for. So they may not have taken a proper official comparison photo of the resin colors, like all those little head caps that look like eggs. But if they have posted those two dolls together, it at least gives me some sort of idea as to whether the resin may match. Yeah, so whether you find like actual good comparison pictures, or you kind of, try to find what you can, like you just find two dolls that are standing next to each other. Also know that how good those comparison pictures are really depends on how consistent the company has been with the resin. So one thing is, of course, just some companies have resin colors that differ batch by batch, meaning different years or different batches of releases have slightly different colors, even though they are all called, let's say, normal skin or tan. There are also companies that are pretty consistent about the resin color, but over the years have changed their formulas from, let's say, let's say Little Monica's white has changed from a yellow-based white to a pink-based white over the years. Or like, same thing with iOS, changed their white skin from a yellow-based white to a pink-based white over the years. So in cases like that, if you do come across comparison pictures of like older iOS or Little Monica white skin, you would know that it is probably not representative of any white skin parts that you'll buy now from the company, right? So things like this will affect any comparison pictures that you find. So of course, there's also resin matching services available nowadays, which was not really that much of a thing back when I made a lot of hybrids. So of course you can always just send, like, let's say your doll's head cap to a company that does resin matching, like let's say, I don't know, like let's say Doll Family A, the body that I bought for Vi. Their company does do body matching. No, the company does do resin matching, although I didn't send Vi's head cap to them, because I'm a paranoid person and I don't like sending my doll parts out. But yeah, that's a different thing. But you know, resin matching is possible. In which case, maybe the thing to research would be how good the company is at actually matching the resin, because I think colors is a tricky thing and it really depends on the skill of the person. So some companies do it better than others, and it's always good to do some research before you put a bunch of money into doing it. So of course, with those two main considerations in mind, size and resin match, a lot of this depends on how perfect you want the fit to be or the match to be, and also how much modification or customization work you're willing to put in, be it to mod the different parts, to add neck donuts, to add epoxy, to do some sort of color matching with airbrush or dyeing or just pastels. All this will affect what kind of hybrids are possible for you. So I hope this gives you a bit of an idea of how to go about making BJD hybrids. You don't have to do it as fussily as I do, or you can do it in a way that is even more fussy than I do. You know, this is really mostly, I guess, how I do it, and I hope it helps. Because I do sometimes get questions about hybrids, so I thought I'll just put together this and hope that it answers some of your questions. And then, not covered in today's video, but I thought I'll just mention it, there's also a more super advanced level of hybridizing, I guess, where it's not just head and body, but then you could possibly, let's say, this torso is from company A, and then the arms are actually from company B, and then the head is from company C, and maybe the feet are from company D, and maybe there's even fantasy leg parts or wings or things like that, right? So for most of those kind of advanced hybridizing, you probably need modification skills. So let's just put it like that, and let me know in the comments if there's any questions, anything I missed out, and like this video if you found it useful. And yeah, I think that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!